Today we're going to go over subject pronouns in Spanish. Now, what exactly is a subject pronoun? Well, a subject is the person in a sentence that does the action. So, for example, if I were to say the sentence, you walk, you would be the subject. Well, a pronoun is going to be a word that is going to replace a person or a thing in a sentence to make it simpler. So instead of saying Alex, I could just say he. Overall, subject pronouns are going to be things like I, you, he, she, it, we, y'all, and they. Now, these are extremely important to learn because every single sentence will contain a subject, although in certain languages, like Spanish, it'll get built into the verb conjugations like we'll see in the next video. But overall, it is important to note that subject pronouns work differently in Spanish than they do in English, as there are some that exist in Spanish that don't in English, and vice versa. So in this video, we'll be covering each of those and how to use them. Alright, so let's get into each subject pronoun now. First, we'll start with yo, which means I. It means I in every single context, in every single country. Simple enough. Next is going to be tú. Tú means you, and it is the most common way to say you in Spanish, although there are 3 different ways to say you, which we'll go over. I would say, though, if you're learning Spanish, this will definitely be the most effective and most common one that you will hear. Next is going to be vos. Vos is used in Argentina, in Paraguay, and Uruguay, and is also used in other countries, but it's just these 3 where it's used commonly. I would say, though, if you're learning Spanish, just learn tú. Tú is going to be better. Next is going to be él, ella, and usted, which will mean he, she, and you, respectfully. However, this version of you is going to be known as a formal version of you. Now, what exactly does that mean? Well, that means that anytime that you use the word usted, it is going to essentially entail a sense of respect along with it. So, I would use this with the elderly, I would use this with strangers, I would use this with professors, with bosses, with anything like that. Anytime that you use it, it is going to show this other person, alright, I have a lot of respect for you. Now, overall, the main difference between tú and usted is that tú is going to be the more common everyday use one versus usted is going to be the more formal one for specific situations. Now, one thing I do want to address, which is a very common misconception, is that usted means it. In no context does usted mean it. Now, I believe that this misconception comes from the fact that people say that the ele usted form is the he, she, it form. That's extremely misleading because the actual way to say it in Spanish is either él or ella. And it all depends on the gender of what we're talking about. Now, an interesting thing about Spanish is that it technically does not exist. There is no neutral term for objects. Everything's either going to be a he or a she. Things that end in O tend to be an él, and things that end in a tend to be an ella. So, for example, if I were to say it is big and it was referring to the table, la mesa, I would say ella es grande, the literal translation being she is big. Now, getting down into nosotros and nosotras, nosotros is going to mean we, same with nosotras. However, these are used in different contexts. You can see that I've labeled this one as masculine and this one as feminine. This basically means that nosotros is going to be used for an all-guy group. So if I were to say we in reference to an all-guy group, we would use nosotros, versus nosotras is going to be for all females. Now, another thing that's interesting to note is the fact that for mixed groups, you also use nosotros. Overall, the rule of thumb in Spanish is that if it is a mixed group of any kind, could even be dominated by females, but if there's just one male in it, you're going to use nosotros. So an interesting analogy could be there could be 99 females in one room and one guy. In order to say we, we'd still use nosotros. It's just the way the Spanish language works. Now next is going to be vosotros and vosotras. And this is going to mean you guys, or y'all, or essentially a plural form of you. Multiple ways to translate it. But an interesting thing to note is that it is only used in Spain. Essentially, somehow, it just got lost when they were taking it over to the New World. Vosotros just didn't stick around. But one thing I will say is that it is going to have the same rule set. So it's going to work the exact same way, in which vosotros is masculine and for mixed groups, and vosotras is feminine. Now, finally, we have ellos, ellas, and ustedes, which are both going to be they. Same rule here. And then finally, ustedes is going to mean you guys, y'all, or you plural. So essentially, if you're trying to learn Latin American Spanish, I would highly recommend just focusing on ustedes, because that is the most commonly used one in Latin America. However, it is also used in Spain, but it's considered formal out there. Overall, though, I would say that ustedes is much more useful. I never use vosotros because I never learned Spanish. So if you're trying to learn Spanish in order to travel Latin America, definitely use ustedes. Another thing to note is that ellos and ellas are going to work the exact same way as nosotros and nosotras, and vosotros and vosotras, in which ellos is for masculine, ellas is for feminine, and ellos is also for mixed. So overall, that is all these subject pronouns in Spanish, and I will see you guys in the next video.